Take it in. And let it go. And again. And release. And one more deep breath. And let it go. To me, there's something that is miraculous about breathing together. We don't think about it until we do it consciously. And then we remember we are all breathing the breath of the divine. So, funny thing happened on the way to the Center for Spiritual Living's annual convention in Southern California last week. I got knocked up. Now, before you become scandalized, or called Ripley's Believe It or Not, let me clarify what I'm talking about here. Truth is, everybody who was at the convention got knocked up last week, even the men. It was quite a party. But what we got knocked up with was a newly energized vision and purpose for our organization and for our teaching. In other words, after getting intimate with the infinite, yes, that song was on purpose, we got knocked up with spirit. We became impregnated with possibilities. Now, in order to understand what I'm talking about here, I need to go give a little bit of a history lesson about our movement and about our organization. So if you know this story already, just forgive me for this, but it's very pertinent to the conversation. So back in 1926, Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote a book called The Science of Mind. And what happened, what made this book so remarkable then and now, is that he synthesized old-time religion and Eastern philosophy and ancient spiritual teachings and science and all these things, and he brought it together and he synthesized it into this teaching that we know and love called the Science of Mind. And it is a beautifully pure, inclusive, and high vibration teaching that has changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. In fact, one of the things he wrote about his teaching was, the whole object of the Science of Mind is to understand the relationship between the individual and the universal, and it's capitalized so you know what we're talking about, the universal. So the whole object is to understand the relationship between the individual and the universal, and to learn how to make conscious use of the universal power for personal purposes for oneself and others. So like I said, it's pure. It's pure, it's inclusive, it is high vibration teaching. However, egos and personalities get involved with things. And when you try to put something into an organization, what happens is that things can kind of get derailed a little bit. You know what I'm talking about here? So this thing is going on, it's in the 30s, it's in the 40s, everything's beautiful, people's lives are changing, and then in the 1950s, what happened was there were two factions involved with the organization, and they got into a kerfuffle. And after the kerfuffle, there was a rift. And after the rift, there became a split. And we actually call it the split. And for years, these two organizations did not speak to one another and did not even acknowledge one another, even though they were teaching exactly the same thing and using the exact same materials. A little bit ironic, wouldn't you say? And kind of ridiculous for a teaching that teaches unity. Yeah. But there it is. It was our human humanness got the better of us. And it went on for decades. In fact, one of the kind of sick jokes that people talked about back in the day about how to heal the split, how can the split be healed? And the answer is one funeral at a time. I know, it's a sick joke, but if you think about it, it makes sense. It's metaphysical. Listen to this. Because Einstein said you cannot solve the problem with the same consciousness that created the problem. So perhaps those whose consciousness led to the split had to move on to their next experience in order to allow a healing to happen. Are you with me? Yeah. So fast forward to the 2000s, and there was a bunch of us on both sides that started talking. This conversation had been going on for a while, but there was a concerted effort. Let's talk about what it would mean to maybe bring the two back together again. Because as small little organizations, we were making an impact, but such a greater impact if we came together, right? So as good an idea as it was, and it was going to be challenging. Because at that time, both organizations, through those years, both those organizations developed very different cultures and very different ways of doing things. So if we were going to come back together again, it was going to take a lot of compromise. And it was going to take a lot of letting go of attachment to how things were. And it was going to involve a lot of working together and forgiveness, because toes were going to get stepped on. Even so, the courtship began. And many dedicated people spent countless hours in meetings working on a way to bring the families back together again. I love this quote by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And that was this group. So it took a number of years and a number of meetings, but finally, at the annual convention in New Orleans in 2012, International Centers for Spiritual Living, formerly called Religious Science International, and United Centers for Spiritual Living, formerly called United Church of Religious Science, got married. And there was great hoopla, and there was great celebration, and we were in New Orleans, and we threw beads, and it was wonderful. The hard part was over. We were married now. Any of you ever tried to blend a family? Yeah. You know, if you have blended a family, you know that the real work happens after the marriage ceremony, right? It's one thing to give lip service to a great idea. It's a whole other thing to actually make it work. And I am here to attest to you that the process of trying to meld these two organizations together and these two cultures was messy. It was messy. And it was hard. And it brought about a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of upset. People, myself included, had a lot of trouble letting go of what was in order to make room for what wanted to be. Yes? Are you with me? My feathers got ruffled so many times, and I would say things like that, like, well, that's not how we used to do it. Sound at all familiar? But you see, that is what needs to happen for something new to be birthed. Something fresh to be known. We have to let go of what we think it's supposed to look like in order to allow what wants to happen, happen. In science of mind, what we talk about is that we provide the mold in our own mind, our consciousness, which in this case was a unified organization, and then we allow ourselves to get intimate with the infinite. We allow the infinite intelligence of the universe to figure out how to bring it into being. But that's not to say we don't just sit around and not do anything. We don't take action. Of course we take action. We do what's in front of us. We do what's in front of us while continuing to know the truth about everything. But while we are knowing the truth and as we are walking along the path, we are not manipulating or coercing or directing how it's supposed to look and the way it's supposed to be. Yes? Are you with me? Ernest Holmes put it this way: the infinite fills all molds and flows it forever into new and greater ones. It is the unborn possibility of limitless experience. We give birth to it. You thought I forgot about the whole knocked up thing, didn't you? So let's say this. Let's say that this greater idea, this new idea called Centers for Spiritual Living, because prior to this, we were two different organizations, and when we came together, we dropped everything and just became Centers for Spiritual Living. Let's say that that was actually conceived in marriage between the two organizations in New Orleans. And no doubt that it was conceived in love, no doubt. No doubt that it was conceived with great vision and with the very best of intentions. But again, for those of us who have gone, not us, those of you who have gone through pregnancy, you know that pregnancy is not all smooth sailing, am I right? As I mentioned before, there are challenges that come along with it. But here is the point. Here is the point. That doesn't stop the baby from doing what babies do. Stick with me here. Through all of the morning sickness and the body changing and the cravings and the tears and the, wait a minute, I'm not sure I want to do this, the baby continued to grow. So here we are in 2018, and that baby is ready to be birthed. That baby is ready to come. So I want to tell you where this analogy came from. I wish I could take complete credit for it, but I cannot. Let me tell you about this. It happened at the convention. Like I said, we all got knocked up there. But I want you to understand where it all came from. So usually in gatherings like this, we feature our most seasoned ministers, the wisest of teachers, the elders of our organization. Those are the ones who are asked to speak at conventions like this. You know that after 20 years of ministry, I'm now considered an elder? I wasn't a speaker at that convention, but I am going to be a speaker at the one this summer in Park City, Utah. Stay tuned. Anyway, so that's what we usually do. We hear from our elders. We hear about their wisdom and how they grew their centers and all of that stuff. However, the convention committee decided to try something different. And they started out the entire event with 3 emerging leaders, fairly newly licensed ministers in their 30s. Oh my God, I was like, are you kidding me? What do they have to teach me? But I've got to tell you something. They absolutely brought the house down. They were so new, and they were fresh, and they were enthusiastic, and they weren't always appropriate, which of course I loved. Y'all don't know this, but my nickname is Reverend Naughty and has been all these years. So I love their naughtiness and their inappropriateness. And so one of them, this young woman in her 30s, brought up this idea about being knocked up. And she introduced the analogy that we got knocked up up by the vision of CSL back in 2012. And that we've been uncomfortably pregnant all this time, and that it was time for that baby to get born. I don't know nothing about birthing babies. Okay. Well, what happened was that meme went through the entire convention. Everybody touched on it at one point or another, including one of the final speakers who was the elder that I was talking about with over 40 years of ministry. And she stood up there in all of her 80-something elegance. And she said, wait till I go home to my senior community and tell them I got knocked up at the conference. And then she went on to talk about the history of the organizations and saying that we needed to honor the past. We need to learn from the past, but not repeat it. She said that we need to allow these fresh and new ideas to be brought forward because we live in different times than when Ernest wrote the book in 1926. And when I got licensed in 1998, I got licensed before the internet. So she talked about how we need to be using the miracle of technology to spread this teaching in a way that people of today will find relevant. Yes? Can I get an amen to that? Absolutely. Now that doesn't mean that we're replacing the tried and true. It means that we are adding to it, that we are enhancing it. So no, Foundations folks, we're not going to be replacing the signs of my text with something easier to read. Sorry. We're just going to figure out a way to present it in a way that is relevant to today's society. Yeah. So I told you that I was going to tie in vision to here because I want to talk a little bit about having a vision because we all know how important it is to have a vision and for manifesting the things that we want to experience in our lives, in our world. And every week we say our vision together. Every single week there's a reason for that. Because Ernest Holmes talked about having a mental equivalent. Thomas Troward talks about having a spiritual prototype. In other words, the idea, that vision, that which we are working toward. So we have the vision, but we don't tell the universe how to bring it about. That's a whole other lesson. So anyway, here in this center, I've been here, it's going to be 5 years next month. I know, 5 years. I left sunny California on April Fool's Day, 2013, true story. I'll talk more about that. So when I first came here, and this center had gone through a lot of changes. Dr. Carroll had left, and they'd sold the building, and they bought another building, but people weren't loving that building, and we were meeting at SAID, and you know what? We were a little muddled back then. We were a little bit muddled in those first couple of years. But then we came together, the board and the ministers and the practitioners and our key volunteers, we came together as a community, and we created that vision, which we repeat every single Sunday. And once we did that, once we got that vision of being a beacon of spiritual illumination and providing tools for people, once we got that, everything began cohesing. And things really started moving. You guys remember, a lot of you guys remember what that was like. Well, this young woman at the conference who used the knocked up analogy reminded us that we had all agreed to a very far-reaching vision for Centers for Spiritual Living back in 2012 in New Orleans. And she speculated that this vision, this idea, this way forward-thinking vision was what we got knocked up with in 2012. And it's this vision that is ready to be born. So I'm going to share that vision with you now, and I've made copies. So if you want a copy of it, because it's actually very beautiful, if you want a copy of it so you can take home with it, you too can be part of birthing this great vision. Yes? So are you ready? I invite you now to listen with an open heart and an open mind. And Esteban, since you just walked in, I'm wondering if you could come noodle back here. He knows what I'm talking about. You know, that musical term, noodle. You don't have to close your eyes because I'm going to put it up on the screen, but just want you to listen. Think about this world. This is the Center for Spiritual Living Global Vision. We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. We see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world in which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. We envision humanity awakening to its spiritual magnificence and discovering the creative power of thought. A world where each and every person discovers his or her own personal power and ability to create an individual life that works within a world that works for everyone. We envision a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life. A world where this kinship of all life prospers and connects through the guidance of spiritual wisdom and experience. We envision a world where personal responsibility joins social conscience in every area of the political, corporate, academic, and social sectors, providing sustainable substructures to further the emerging global consciousness. We envision a world where each and every person has enough food, a home, and a sense of belonging. A world of peace and harmony, enfranchisement and justice. We envision a world in which resources are valued, cared for, and grown, and where there is generous and continuous sharing of these resources. We envision a worldwide culture in which forgiveness, whether for errors, injustices, or debts, is the norm. We envision a world which has renewed its emphasis on beauty, nature, and love through the resurgence of creativity, art, and aesthetics. We envision a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. Breathe it in. If this vision has called to you, if it speaks to you, if it got there, then congratulations. You too. Sorry guys. You too are knocked up. And you are pregnant with possibilities. So let's get this baby born. What do you say? Thank you. Let me be intimate with the infinite. Let me do something real cool. Oh, my baby. Please welcome Amy Bishop and our band.